Hey everyone, in this video, I want to show you how you can update a read-only database user to enable it to write to the Cortex specific part of your Cherwell database. This is useful if you want to, for instance, be able to save ad hoc searches or override the security groups that specific users are using or override the configuration of external data connections. Now, typically, you want to run Cortex with a read-only user uh, so that Cortex doesn't actually have the ability to write to any part of your Cherwell database. I'll actually show you a database in just a second where I've done exactly that. And you can see how I created that user in the video linked in the description below. Where we created a user called Cortex. It is a read-only user, doesn't have any write access to the database, but of course has those limitations of not being able to save some of this additional state and take advantage of some of these additional features. Now, of course, you could go the other direction and just enable read-write access to the entire database. But we don't recommend that. And in most cases, you probably only want to allow read access to all of your shareable data. You want to be able to guarantee that it is in exactly the same state that it was the last day that you used Sharewell. So in this video, we're going to dive into SQL Server Management Studio. It is a little bit technical, so if that's uh, not quite something you're comfortable with, feel free to pause the video and grab a friend who is comfortable with SQL Server Management Studio. The concepts will be helpful, even if some of the typing that I'll be doing is a little bit complicated. And we're going to uh, change that user that I created in the previous video so that it can actually write to a specific part of the database that I've created. So let's dive into SQL Server Management Studio. And as an example, I want to show you this database up here, which is configured with just a read-write user. The user that Cortex uses to connect to this database has access to obviously read from the database, but also to write to it. And we can see that in addition to the standard dbo.whatever tables that we're used to seeing from Cherwell, there are also some tables called cortex.stuff. Now, this cortex dot and this dbo dot is actually not part of the table name. It's something called a schema, uh, which you can see down in security, schemas, and you can see here there's a DBO schema, there's a Cortex schema. There are a few other schemas as well, but DBO is the main one that everybody's familiar with. Um, and you can create your own. In this case, we have created our own called Cortex. That name is very important. It will come back later on in the video. But if we look in this other database, which is the database that I created the Cortex user in the previous video, that has read-only access. It only has the DBO schema and a bunch of other internal schemas, but it doesn't have the Cortex schema. So first off, let's go ahead and fix that. Let's create a new schema and let's call it Cortex. That's it. Just that statement right there. We'll execute that. And it appears that I already have a schema called Cortex. Apparently I do. Uh, but let's delete that so you can see exactly what happens. There we go. So now we've created it again. Schema is fairly lightweight, so there's nothing really, it's not a big deal that I deleted it and created it again. So there is one bit of configuration that we need to do in order to allow the Cortex user to be able to write to create tables in this Cortex schema. And that's this command right here. I couldn't find a way to, right click on something and, grant permissions, that sort of thing. Depending on the version of SQL Server Management Studio that you're using and the version of SQL Server that you're connected to, that might not be the case. There might be a way that you can click and do this. But the important thing is that we want to grant the control permission, And that's basically create table, insert, update, delete, all that good stuff. On schema, and then these two colons are important, but there is a space between schema and the two colons. And then Cortex, which in this case is the name of the schema, it has to be Cortex because that's what Cortex expects. Cortex, the application, expects the Cortex schema to Cortex. In this case, it's referring to the user uh, that's created here. So we'll run that command as well. Command completed successfully. And unfortunately, I can't show you the result of this, but at this point, I can use the Cortex user to connect to this database from Cortex, the application, and it'll be able to create all of those Cortex specific tables. Now, there might be a situation where, this is cool and all, and I can guarantee that the DBO schema is read only, the Cortex schema is read write to that user. But if you want to separate those two functions out into completely separate databases, there is a way to do that in Cortex. You can click this video over here and see exactly how to do that. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in that video over there.